So the visuals that you see behind me is not a scene from an animation movie or from a sci-fi projection. It is actually a group of doctors from across the world, from countries as far away as Brazil and US and UK, Malaysia, Vietnam, and multiple centers across India. And we're all gathered together in a virtual reality digital environment, interacting with each other as avatars and discussing strategies on operating an exceedingly rare and complex heart defect in a young child. And that blue avatar is me, uh, guiding and leading this discussion. So instead of being present together in person, we are all interacting with each other seamlessly as these digital avatars gathered in a 3D environment and around a three-dimensional holographic representation of the CT scan of the child's heart, discussing, debating with each other, and doing virtual dissections and virtual surgical steps, all in a very deeply immersive three-dimensional world, while we're all wearing virtual reality gaming headsets and connected to the Wi-Fi. This seems like incredible gamification of medicine, right? Almost like science fiction. But medicine is not a game. It's a very serious business where we as doctors need to take life and often destiny determining decisions on our patients based on a mix of data points that include the clinical history, the physical examination, the blood reports, and very importantly, the medical scans of our patients. I am a pediatric cardiologist and I take care of children with congenital heart defects. The human heart, though simple, is a very complex organ and comprised of four chambers, two sets of veins, two arteries, and four valves. And they're all arranged and working together in a perfectly synchronized manner. Congenital heart disease happens when this harmonious arrangement is disrupted, and it can be pretty bizarrely disrupted, almost as if a young, innocent child has jumbled up the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And we, as a doctor, in order to fix this, we need to clearly understand this disordered arrangement. And for this purpose, we use scans of various types, like ultrasounds and CTs and MRI, to study and understand these anatomical variations. But traditionally, we look at these scans as these 2D images on 2D workstation screens. And it can be incredibly hard to understand the three-dimensionality of complex human anatomy by just looking at two-dimensional images. And each individual's ability to view in 2D and to imagine in 3D can be very variable, and it depends upon one's experience and one's spatial ability and spatial intelligence, like the way that you would mentally rotate an object in your mind, or our depth perception. That is very variable from person to person. And as doctors, this variability can deeply impact our decision making. And many times, we as doctors do not even understand or acknowledge this. Let me illustrate this with a real life situation. 10 years ago, I met a young boy in my clinic. He was all of 17 and frail and blue from a very complex form of congenital heart disease. He had been seen by many doctors and had undergone many heart scans, but doctors had been unable to offer him surgical treatment simply because his heart condition was so rare and complex. His heart was on the right side instead of being on the left, and there was a large hole inside the heart through which the pure and the impure blood were mixing. His arteries were in their wrong position, and one of the major valves of the heart was severely blocked. And it was genuinely tough for the surgeons to understand it clearly enough to do a heart surgery on him. After a deep analysis of his MRI, I, as an imager, had the conviction that we could operate him, but I failed to convince my team members that we could operate this young kid. So I was faced with the tough choice of either doing nothing more for him versus doing something radical, and I chose to do the latter. And I resorted to a new way to see and present his imaging information. 3D printing is technology that can convert 3D digital data into physical prototypes. So I decided to convert the MRI scan of his heart into a life-size 3D printed model, something that had never been done before in our country. 3D printing in healthcare was a very nascent concept at that time, particularly in our part of the world. So I collaborated with a pioneering 3D company based out of Belgium, and with their help created a 3D printed replica of this young boy's heart. I can never forget the moment that we first held this young boy's heart print in our hands. It was as if a fog had lifted from our conscious understanding of his heart. His anatomy became crystal clear. Mysteries that had confounded our collective intelligence and wisdom for so many years and prevented this young boy from getting much needed heart surgery dissipated into clear, tangible knowledge, because now we could actually touch, hold, see, and move this 3D representation of his heart. This young boy was successfully operated at this center, and this was the very first instance of a 3D print assisted heart surgery in South Asia. After his surgery, I used to see him every day during my clinical rounds in the ICU. On the third day after his surgery, he made a very unusual request. He had just gotten off the ventilator and he says to me, Sir, I want to see the heart print. And I said, fine, yes, of course. And just before his discharge from the hospital, I called him into my chamber and I showed him the 3D model of his heart. And he said something that completely shook me. He said, Sir, I have built a 3D printer 3 months ago. And mind you, this is the year 2015. My first response was utter surprise and amazement. A 17-year-old, 11th grade boy from rural Kerala telling me that he's built a 3D printer in an era where 3D printing was still pretty much unknown to majority in our country, including engineers. So as it turns out, this young boy, unable to attend school regularly due to his heart condition, was a brilliant tech enthusiast. He had been reading books and researching the internet on science and tech in all the hours that he was missing out on school. He was already building electronic circuit boards by the time he was in 6th grade. And by the time he was in the 9th grade, he had built a home automation system so that he didn't have to get up every time from his bed to switch on a fan or switch off the light. And his own fascination for the evolving 3D printing technologies had led him on to build his own 3D printer, completely oblivious to the fact that in another parallel universe, I, as a doctor, was exploring the potential of using 3D printing to plan his complex heart surgery. So my amazement changed to incredulous wonder at this almost poetic, miraculous serendipity of it all. And this was something else. This was destiny at work. And this inspired me to establish a 3D printing lab at our own institution. If this young boy could be saved using this tech, I was sure that we could impact many, many more lives. And my relationship with him became more than a doctor-patient relationship. It transformed into a deep friendship. I became his mentor and he became my inspiration. And even as he graduated from school and went to college, he continued to help and advise me on creating a medical 3D ecosystem in our hospital, spending every vacation, spending time with me, thinking and tinkering with tech in my 3D lab. But now let's take a pause and I'll talk more about this boy a little later. With 3D printing, we were now challenging the way that doctors looked at medical scans. We were transforming the way that we were diagnosing and managing complex problems. Child after child, case after case, we were able to solve problems that seemed unsolvable simply because now we had a new perspective into patient anatomy. On one of my visits to a rural hospital, I met a mother who had had a baby about 6 months back with an extremely rare birth defect. This baby was born without the breastbone or the sternum. And there was just the skin covering the heart. And one could see the baby's heart thumping through the chest, unprotected and vulnerable. This is called the complete sternal defect. Doctors had only consolation to offer. The parents were heartbroken and terrified at the same time, and they were petrified of even holding the child, bathing the child, feeding the child, constantly living in the fear of hurting the baby's heart. And at this point of time, we decided to do something very unusual for this baby. And we brought this child back to our hospital. It was a very difficult medical problem to solve. And we created a digital twin of this baby's rib cage and then 3D printed it into a life-size replica that helped us to clearly understand the anatomy. We could clearly understand the nature of the sternal cleft, and that helped us plan her surgery. And it became an incredible collaborative project between the cardiologists, the cardiac surgeons, and the plastic surgeons. We all sat together and brainstormed, and then we built a strategy to build a sternum for this child using a piece of the baby's own 9th rib so that it would even grow with the child. The entire surgery was simulated multiple times on the 3D printed model of the rib cage. And this child was successfully operated exactly as per the plan when she was about 9 months old. And this beautiful young lady is the same baby as a 7-year-old healthy child today. And yes, pink is her favorite color. And as we solved seemingly one unsolvable problem after the other, the acceptance for the technologies began to grow. Doctors in general are not easy to adopt a new tech. The 3D lab began to grow organically, and it thrived on a multidisciplinary innovation ecosystem with the technology inspiring doctors across specialities to think differently and work differently. And it was helping them to plan each step of the surgery in advance so that it could be performed in the most efficient and most accurate manner with minimum complications. This young teenage boy with a huge tumor on the face was yet another remarkable case. He was refused surgery at multiple institutions because of extraordinarily high risk in surgery. He had lost all hope and was struggling to breathe, to eat, to live. And he was brought here by a crew from Discovery Channel and a remarkably skilled multidisciplinary surgical team from our hospital put together a surgical plan that was based on deep anatomical understanding using 3D printed models and virtual planning tools. And together, we executed an incredible surgery that lasted over 12 hours in the operating room. And this surgery may not have been possible without the use of 3D technologies. So the craniomaxillofacial surgeons started using these technologies, so did the orthopedic surgeons and the neurosurgeons and the transplant surgeons and the oncosurgeons and so on. And 3D printed models from across specialities also became valuable learning tools for doctors in training because they were all like morphological specimens that one could spend time with and understand. So this became a unique ecosystem, but so far it was being run by us busy doctors scampering to find time in between clinical work to work with the tech until this brilliant young engineer joined our team and brought extraordinary technical expertise to what we were already doing. From anatomical modeling, we were progressing into patient-specific implants and custom therapies. But 3D printing did have its limitations. It needed hardware, physical space, materials, and most importantly, time. And this brought us to the next transformational point. I was watching these young people putting on VR headsets and playing these virtual reality immersive 3D games. And that triggered the thought of, can we gamify the visualization of medical imaging data? After all, medical imaging data was also 3D data, much like 3D game designs. And we began to explore how we could bring 3D models into virtual reality instead of printing them out every time. We began by repurposing existing 3D viewer apps on Play Stores of various devices. And then we started collaborating with brilliant young developers from across the world who wanted to develop VR tools, especially for the medical fields. And today we are able to engage with medical data in VR very immersively. We can simulate various surgical steps. We can mark, we can annotate, we can scale, and we can do virtual surgeries using these platforms, helping us prepare very, very well for complex procedures. And this is enabling us as doctors to overcome individual variations in spatial thinking and clinical experience while planning complex treatments. Now we are able to better see whatever is there, and we're also able to better imagine what we can do, finding newer ways to operate and finding treatment solutions for patients who could otherwise be considered untreatable or inoperable by the traditional means of working. A serendipitous meeting with a tech innovator helped us to indigenously develop this powerful new multiplayer VR platform that today helps doctors from across the world collaborate together in virtual reality, discussing and planning complex case operations together. And this is beginning to empower and enable knowledge sharing across the world like never before. At this point, let's cut back to the young boy who started and inspired all of this. This kid continued to be connected with the growth of the 3D lab in our hospital and with me personally. He also became a vocal advocate, not just for the use of technology in healthcare, but also for the cause of congenital heart disease survivors from across the world. A year back, he rejoined our lab, this time as a PhD scholar, exploring new ways to use immersive 3D technologies in heart care. And today, I'm extremely proud, as exactly 10 years after his destiny-changing 3D print-assisted heart surgery, he was awarded the highest research award at the recently concluded annual conference of pediatric cardiologists and cardiac surgeons of India in Mumbai just 3 days back for helping design normal workflows for the use of 3D technologies in the safe planning and execution of complex congenital heart defects. Life comes a full circle. And as his friend and mentor, it was my privilege to receive the award on his behalf. And I'm just looking to see if he's sitting in this audience somewhere. Even if not, you'll probably see him in these corridors one of these days. And I'm so immensely proud of him. And thankful to him for inspiring this journey that is going on to impact so many lives, not just here at my institution, but across the world. This has been a journey full of serendipities and connected destinies and friendships, passion, and purpose. And as we stand at the transformational point where novel technologies like AR, VR, and AI are changing the world at breakneck speed, we can find the most meaningful ways to use these technologies. So, openness to change the way that we think and work can impact lives in almost unimaginable ways. So, let us continue to imagine, innovate, and inspire. Thank you very much.